My parents kicked me out for choosing tech over finance. Now I owned their house, raised the rent, and watched them crumble like I once did. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio. I was 22, working part-time at a run-down supermarket that paid me minimum wage, chasing my finance degree. My parents, Mark and Susan, had mapped out every piece of my future, and they weren't shy about reminding me. They thought they knew what was best: a safe career in finance, a house in the suburbs, the whole package. They never asked what I actually wanted. One Thursday evening, we were sitting around our dining room table, eating dry meatloaf that tasted like cardboard. I tried to keep my mouth shut. They'd twist any complaint into ungrateful child territory. Out of nowhere, Dad broke the silence. "So, how's the finance major going? I figured we'd talk about it tonight," he said, stirring his peas. My heart sank. I put down my fork and said, voice trembling, "I've been thinking. I want to switch to computer science." Dead silence. I could hear the clock ticking in the hallway. Mom forced a laugh. "Computer science? That's cute but not practical," she said, tightening her smile. Dad slammed his fork down. "Are you kidding? Finance is where the money is. This isn't some hobby." I swallowed hard. "It's not a hobby. I've been really into coding, thinking I could actually make something of it," Dad scoffed. "Passion doesn't pay bills, honey. You're being reckless. This is your future, not a whim." Mom chimed in, egging him on. Their words cut deeper than I expected. I looked at my plate, anger building, but I knew arguing spelled disaster. They didn't care what I wanted. They just saw me as their pet project. Every step I took off the path they laid was a failure in their eyes. That night, I locked myself in my room and called my best friend Ashley. "How'd it go?" she asked, calm but concerned. "Like a wreck," I whispered, rubbing my temples. "They completely shut me down." Ashley sighed. "Mark and Susan can be suffocating, but you're 22. You don't owe them your dreams. This is your life." I collapsed onto my bed. She was right. I was an adult, and it was time I started acting like one. The next morning, determination mixed with dread. I found them downstairs watching morning news in the living room. I cleared my throat. "Mom, Dad, we need to talk." They paused the TV. I stared at them. "I'm switching to computer science. This is what I want to study." Dad snapped, "No, you're not." I held my ground. "Yes, I am." My voice was quieter, steadier. Mom crossed her arms. "If you're that serious, you can support yourself. You have 24 hours to leave." It felt surreal, like being hit with a knockout punch. My own home tossed out in a heartbeat. I left the room numb and called my roommate Mike. "They kicked me out," I said, voice shaking. "I have nowhere to go." "Come stay with me," Mike said without hesitation. That was it. I was homeless. Parents had dumped their kid because he dared to dream. The next days blurred into survival mode. Mike lived in a cramped studio apartment in a sketchy part of town. I collapsed onto his couch every night, falling asleep to the sound of creaking springs and passing traffic. No complaints, though. Better that than begging. School suffered. I couldn't focus on assignments, guilt gnawing at my head. My savings dwindled fast. Ashley kept sending me tech internship leads, but I just didn't have time. My life was about just surviving. One afternoon we got lunch at a greasy sandwich shop near Mike's. I barely ate, anxiety eating at me. "How are you holding up?" she asked, worried. "Not great," I shrugged. "I'm falling behind in class and I'm out of money." She squeezed my hand. "You're stronger than you think. This isn't the end. It's just a bump." But it felt like a mountain. Weeks passed, feeling bleaker every day. My savings were gone. Mike couldn't cover the rent forever. So I did the unthinkable. I dropped out of college. Sitting in the dean's office, signing the paperwork, I felt like a total failure. I'd wanted to be the first college grad in my family, but now that dream was over. Walking out felt surreal. No degree, no money, no plan. I called Ashley again, voice hollow. "I dropped out today," I said. She hesitated. "I'm sorry, but This isn't it. You'll find a way." I wanted to believe her, but everything felt stuck. Then I applied everywhere. The only job offer? Sunnyside Diner. A greasy, run-down spot that hadn't been cleaned since Reagan was in office. I took it. Anything was better than nothing. I flipped burgers by day, then played security guard in an empty office building at night to make ends meet. My life became a grind. Greasy diner mornings, soulless night shifts. Sleep was a rare luxury. My backpack carried my life. But I was paying rent to Mike. I refused to freeload. Ashley never gave up. She checked in daily, pushed me to look for internships. But energy levels were non-existent. One day, while flipping burgers, a customer noticed me coding on my phone between orders. "You into coding?" he asked. "Yeah, just teaching myself for a possible career." He handed me his business card. "I work at a small tech firm. We're hiring entry-level help." That was the break I needed. I updated my resume that night and sent it, heart pounding with hope. A week later, I was on a bus to a downtown interview. Code samples, honest admission, no degree, just passion. The boss, Tina, tested me on the spot. Adrenaline kicked in. I solved it. "He's got promise," Tina told the founder. And just like that, I landed a job. My nights were still long, diner, building security shifts, but for the first time in months, I had purpose. Tina and Trevor, my new managers at the startup, didn't coddle me. And I didn't want them to. They showed me the ropes, expected me to keep up, and pushed me to figure things out on my own. Every time I solved something without needing help, it gave me a jolt of confidence I hadn't felt in years. I still had the other 2 jobs, of course. I couldn't afford to quit either just yet, so I was pulling triple duty, working at the startup during the day, flipping burgers in the evening, and pulling the occasional graveyard shift at the security job. I was barely sleeping, living off coffee and vending machine snacks. I felt like a zombie most days, but I kept telling myself it was temporary. Ashley was my rock through all of it. She never complained when I was too tired to hang out. She'd show up at the diner with snacks, send me job listings, or just sit with me while I coded on my laptop. She believed in me, even when I was too exhausted to believe in myself. After a couple of months juggling everything, I hit my limit. I had to make a call. So one morning, after a brutal overnight shift and a full day at the startup, I walked into the diner and asked to speak with Earl. "I gotta quit," I told him, dead on my feet. He looked at me for a long second, then gave a rare nod. "You'll be all right, kid," he said. "You worked hard, that'll take you far." And just like that, one piece of the chaos was gone. It was scary but necessary. I still kept the security job on the weekends just to make ends meet, but dropping the diner gig gave me the time and brain space I needed to actually breathe and focus. With more energy, I started throwing myself into work at the startup. I read coding blogs on my lunch break, stayed late to ask questions, and volunteered for projects I wasn't entirely sure I could handle. I was still learning every day, but I could feel the shift. I wasn't just trying to stay afloat anymore. I was starting to swim. One day, Tina pulled me aside and said, "You're doing solid work, Jake, but you're playing it safe." I blinked, caught off guard. "Safe?" She nodded, crossing her arms. "You've got skills, but you stick to what you know. This field moves fast. You've got to push yourself if you want to stand out." I nodded, letting that sink in. She was right. I'd been so focused on survival, I hadn't dared to take risks. So I changed that. I started raising my hand for more challenging assignments. I tackled messy code bases, volunteered to troubleshoot production bugs, and helped redesign a client's app from the ground up. I made plenty of mistakes, but each one taught me something. And over time, I noticed something I hadn't felt in a long while. Pride. I was building something not just for the company, but for myself. Then came a big opportunity. Tina called me into her office and handed me a project binder. "New client," she said. "They're revamping their internal systems. I want you to lead the rebuild." My stomach flipped. It was a massive job, but I nodded. "I'm in." The next several weeks were a blur of whiteboards, late nights, and debugging marathons. I barely left the office. Ashley dropped off food and told me not to die at my desk, but I couldn't stop. I had something to prove, not just to Tina or the client, but to myself. I needed to know that I could handle something big. The night before the final presentation, I barely slept. I ran through my pitch over and over until I could recite it in my sleep. The next morning, I stood in the conference room, palms sweating as the client team filed in. Tina sat at the end of the table, giving me a small nod. "You've got this," she seemed to say without speaking. I launched into the presentation, walking them through every part of the system rebuild. I fumbled a few lines, but I kept going. When I finished, the room was quiet for a beat. Then the client's lead tech officer nodded. "This is good," he said. "We're moving forward." I exhaled like I'd been holding my breath for hours. Afterward, Tina clapped a hand on my shoulder. "You earned it," she said, smiling. "Keep this up, Jake. You've got a future here." That was the turning point, the moment I stopped doubting whether I belonged in tech and started seeing myself as someone who could actually succeed. Ashley noticed it too. Our conversations changed. Instead of talking about survival or how tired I was, we talked about projects, goals, even maybe taking a vacation someday. One night, after a long week, we were curled up on her couch and she looked at me and said, "I always knew you'd get here. You just needed to see it for yourself." I didn't know what to say. She'd seen me at my lowest, never once walking away. "Thanks," I whispered. "I couldn't have done this without you." She shook her head. "You would have? I just reminded you." After that project, things really started to change. I wasn't just another junior guy anymore. People in the office started coming to me with questions. Tina handed me more responsibility, more complicated projects. I was getting better and faster at solving problems, thinking through systems and managing timelines. It was exhausting, yeah, but the good kind of exhausting. The kind where you collapse at the end of the day knowing you actually accomplished something. I finally dropped the security job too. Money was still tight, but I was managing. I wasn't living large, but for the first time in years I didn't have to calculate whether I could afford gas and groceries in the same week. Ashley and I talked about the future more. Where we wanted to live, what kind of home we saw ourselves in. I didn't think I'd ever have those conversations, not with the way life had been going. But here we were, making plans, dreaming again. One afternoon, Tina called me into her office, again. My heart jumped a little. I never quite got over that back-to-school feeling whenever the boss wanted to talk. "Jake," she said, sliding a folder toward me, "we've got a huge opportunity, a new client. They need a full infrastructure rebuild, and I want you to lead it." I looked at the file and felt the weight of it instantly. It was bigger than anything I'd done before. Complex, high-stakes, client-facing. My brain was already spinning through what the plan might look like. "I'm in," I said before I could overthink it. And just like that, my world narrowed into project timelines, team meetings, system diagrams, and code reviews. For the next 6 weeks, I was living at the office. Ashley kept me grounded. Showing up with takeout, reminding me to eat, forcing me to take 10-minute walks outside just to breathe. "You're going to burn out," she'd say, brushing the hair off my forehead as I collapsed into bed for a few hours of sleep. But I couldn't stop. I'd never had a shot like this, and I wasn't going to blow it. The night before the final client presentation, I was wired. Pacing, rehearsing, clicking through slides, second-guessing details. It felt like everything, my job, my growth, my identity, was riding on that meeting. I got to the office before dawn the next day, nerves coiled tight in my stomach. The boardroom filled up with suits and decision-makers. Tina gave me a nod from the far end. I took a deep breath and dove in. I talked them through the architecture, the security protocols, the deployment strategy. I fumbled a couple of transitions but kept going. I answered their questions without hesitation. When I finished, there was a long silence. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears. Then one of the execs looked up and said, "This is exactly what we've been looking for. We're greenlighting the plan." I felt my knees almost give out. Tina walked over after they left and said, "You crushed it. I knew you would." I didn't know what to say. It felt like the last 2 years of grinding and surviving had finally brought me somewhere real. That night I called Ashley. "They approved the project," I said, voice still shaky. "They loved it." She laughed. "Told you. I'm proud of you, Jake." Hearing that, It made everything click. I'd gone from flipping burgers and pulling graveyard shifts to leading major projects. It wasn't just about the job anymore. It was about what I'd built, on my own terms. The next couple of years were a whirlwind. I kept climbing the ladder, earning promotions, leading bigger projects, mentoring junior devs. I finally started making real money. Not crazy rich, but comfortable, stable. Ashley and I moved into a decent apartment in a nicer part of the city. We bought furniture that didn't come from the curb. I started saving, thinking bigger. I'd always had this crazy dream in the back of my mind, starting my own tech company. I figured maybe it was time to stop dreaming and actually go for it. I ran the idea past Ashley one night over dinner. "You think I'm nuts?" I asked. She smiled. "Not at all. I think you're finally ready." So I started building. Nights, weekends, coffee-fueled brainstorming sessions. It wasn't easy. I made a million mistakes, but I learned. And slowly, my side hustle turned into a legit business. I landed a few clients, hired a small team. We started growing. Within a year, I was running my own company full-time. It felt surreal. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building something real, something mine. Then one night, while scrolling through real estate listings, something stopped me in my tracks. My childhood home, the one my parents still lived in, was listed for sale. I hadn't talked to Mark or Susan in years. After they kicked me out, I pretty much cut ties, but seeing that house again, even just in a listing, brought back a flood of emotions. It was going for a surprisingly low price. I stared at the screen for a long time, then picked up my phone and called my realtor. "I want to make an offer," I said. No hesitation. The deal closed fast. A few weeks later, the house was mine. I didn't even tell my parents I was the buyer. Let them be surprised. About a week after the sale went through, I got a call from the property manager who'd been handling the place. "The tenants want to meet the new owner," he said. "Something about the rent and a few repairs." I could hear the curiosity in his voice, but I kept it professional. "Tell them I'll be by next week." I didn't say much else. I wasn't ready to process how weird it all felt. Owning the house I was kicked out of was like some twisted full-circle moment. I wasn't planning on rubbing it in their faces, but I wasn't going to hide either. When the day came, I pulled up in my new car and parked in front of the house. It looked smaller than I remembered. The paint was fading, the porch light flickered. I walked up the steps and knocked on the door. It opened slowly. My dad stood there, gray at the temples, eyes squinting at me like he couldn't quite place the face. "We're here to meet the landlord," he said. "That'd be me," I replied. "Hi, Dad." The look on his face, confusion giving way to realization, was something I'll never forget. A few seconds later, my mom appeared behind him. She gasped, "Jake, what are you doing here?" I stepped inside, trying not to let the emotion show on my face. "I'm the new owner. This house, it's mine now." They stood there, frozen. The same people who told me I couldn't survive on my own were now staring at me in disbelief, realizing I had done exactly that, and then some. I wasn't there to argue, though. I was there to talk business. "Let's sit down," I said. "We need to discuss rent." They followed me to the living room, sitting stiffly on the couch like guests in someone else's home, which technically they were. "I'm tripling the rent," I said calmly. My dad's eyes widened. "You can't be serious." "I am," I replied. "This is a business decision. Property values have gone up. I'm making a fair adjustment." My mom leaned forward, voice cracking. "Jake, we can't afford that. You know we can't." I shrugged. "Then you'll have to make a choice. Pay it or move. It's up to you." And it wasn't easy saying that. As much as I'd fantasized about this moment in the past, me successful, them speechless, it didn't feel triumphant. It felt hollow. They looked stunned, probably realizing for the first time just how far I'd come and how far they'd fallen. I didn't gloat. I didn't yell. I just stood up, thanked them for their time, and walked out. In the car, I sat there gripping the steering wheel, trying to make sense of it all. I wasn't angry, not really. I wasn't even satisfied. I just felt done. Like something had closed, a chapter maybe, a wound. The truth is, it was never really about revenge. It was about control, about reclaiming the narrative they tried to write for me. Owning that house wasn't about forcing them to suffer. It was about proving to myself that I wasn't the failure they thought I'd be, that I could make it, that I did make it. But no amount of rent increases or property deeds could undo the hurt they caused. That's when it hit me. I didn't need their apology. I didn't need them to understand. What I needed was to move on. The next day, I had the property manager handle everything going forward. I wouldn't deal with them directly anymore. If they stayed, fine. If not, that was fine too. Either way, I had closure. Ashley was quiet when I told her everything. She just listened, holding my hand. "How do you feel?" she asked. I thought about it for a second. "Free," I said. "Finally free." She smiled. "Then it was worth it." I nodded. Maybe it was. The past had shaped me, no doubt, but it didn't own me anymore, and that was everything. I poured myself back into the business after that. We landed a few big contracts, expanded the team, moved into a small office downtown. Every day felt like another step forward. I wasn't running from my past anymore. I was building a future I chose, a life I created. And that was the most empowering part of all. Over the next year, the company grew faster than I expected. We started getting consistent clients, built up a reputation for delivering solid work, and soon I was hiring full-time staff. I went from being a guy pulling night shifts just to pay rent to signing contracts worth tens of thousands of dollars. It felt surreal. Every now and then I'd catch myself just staring out my office window, remembering that night I slept on Mike's couch with no clue what tomorrow would bring. And now here I was, CEO of my own company, leading meetings, managing a team, making real money. I wasn't rich, not yet, but I was stable. More than that, I was proud. Ashley and I got engaged during that time too. Nothing fancy, just a quiet proposal at the park where we had our first real conversation years ago. She cried. I did too. We started planning a future together, something built on trust, support, and all the chaos we'd survived. We also bought a house, not the old one, but a brand new place out in the suburbs with a yard and space for everything we'd dreamed of. One afternoon, I got an email from my old university. Apparently, they were launching a mentorship program and wanted to know if I'd be interested in speaking to students about non-traditional career paths in tech. My first instinct was to delete the email. I hadn't stepped foot on that campus since the day I dropped out. But something made me pause. Maybe it was the thought of helping someone like me, a kid drowning in expectations, just needing someone to tell them it's okay to take a different path. So, I said yes. A few weeks later, I found myself standing in a small lecture hall, staring at a room full of students who looked like I used to. Tired, unsure, but hopeful. I told them my story, the jobs, the burnout, the doubt, the breakthroughs. I told them how getting kicked out felt like the end of everything and turned out to be the beginning of something better. And when I finished, I looked out at them and said, "Don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to start over. Sometimes the detour is the real path." After the talk, a few students came up to thank me. One of them said, "I've been thinking about switching majors, but I was scared. Hearing you made me feel like maybe I can actually do it." That hit me hard, because that was me, all those years ago, scared, alone, and unsure. If I could help just one person not feel that way, it was worth it. That night I sat in my home office, looking around at everything I'd built, not just the business or the house, but the life, the stability, the peace. I thought about my parents sometimes, wondered how they were doing. I hadn't heard from them since that meeting at the house. I didn't hold on to the anger anymore. I didn't need to. They had made their choice and I'd made mine. I wasn't angry. I was just past it. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It means not letting the pain control you anymore. And for the first time, I truly understood that. The path I took wasn't what anyone had planned. It was messy, hard, and full of moments where I wanted to give up. But it was mine. Every step, every setback, every small win. I earned it. That night, Ashley walked in, leaned on the doorframe, and smiled. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. I looked at her and smiled back. "Everything. How far we've come." She walked over, kissed the top of my head, and said, "You should write it down someday." "Maybe I will, or maybe I'll just keep living it, because the truth is, the story's not over, not by a long shot, and that's the best part. I don't know where this road leads next, but I know I'm not afraid of it, because I've learned that sometimes the life you build from the ground up when everything falls apart is the one that fits you best.